Right, this video will show you how to make your bread-based pizza if you fancy having a go at one of these at home. The first thing that you do is put your flour, which we're using strong flour, which is better for bread making as it gives a better rise. There is also half a teaspoon of salt in here, a teaspoon of sugar, just a small amount of margarine, which just helps the bread dough to last a little bit longer, and a teaspoon of dried yeast. So that all needs to be mixed together, just rubbing the margarine in until there are no lumps of margarine. This won't take as long as it does when you do rubbing in for scones or when you've done a crumble, because there's not as much margarine in there. There's just a small amount, as I said, to make sure that the bread dough lasts a little bit longer. The salt is in there for flavouring, and the yeast will obviously be what will make the pizza bread dough rise. So once you've rubbed all of that in, which as I said literally is not going to take very long at all, you can add your warm water. It's important to make sure you're using warm water because this will help the yeast to actually start working quicker and make sure that you've got a good rise. If you can remember from the bread experiment that we did in year 8, if you add boiling water to your dough, that will actually kill the yeast off before it has a chance to work. So it is really important to make sure that it is warm water. Cold water will work as well, but that just actually takes a little bit longer to get going and to activate. So in terms of speeding the process up, making sure that we have a nice quick process, it's better to actually use warm water. So as you can see, I've actually mixed that around now, and it's actually turned to a dough, so we don't need to add any more water to that. If you did have any dry bits in there, it may be that you needed to add a little bit more water, but we can actually scrape the mixture out where we can start kneading it. So if you put your dough down onto a floured surface, try not to use too much flour, because if you have too much flour down, it will start to dry out the dough, which then just makes it more difficult when you actually want to spread it out onto your pizza tray. So make sure you're not using too much flour and that you're actually just working it to make sure that it's not actually sticky, and this also helps to get the yeast to start working. It's not the same as when we did your bread rolls, or when you did your bread rolls, because we don't actually need it to rise quite as much as the bread rolls. So we just need to knead it just for a few minutes to make sure that it's actually all coming together nicely. So once your dough has actually come into a nice firm ball of dough, you can actually start to spread it out onto your pizza tray. So you can start this process off on your work surface. I personally don't recommend using rolling pins to do this, because as you can see, when you're actually patting the dough, it does actually shrink back in, which is correct. That's what it's actually supposed to do. But when you're using a rolling pin, it just means that you can't actually get the dough to actually stay spread out. So I've always found the best way to do this is to just actually spread the dough out with your fingertips. It does take a little bit of time, but as long as you persevere with it and you just keep pressing it out, it will actually go right to the edges. If it starts to get a bit sticky, just actually put a bit of flour onto your fingertips, and again that will actually help to spread the dough out. If you are finding that your dough is a little bit tough and it's not actually spreading out quite as quickly or as much as you'd like to, if you just pop it under the grill just above the oven, don't turn the grill on, you just actually want the heat coming up from underneath the oven. If you pop it under the grill for a few minutes, that will actually start to activate the yeast, and your dough will actually start to rise a bit, and that then makes it that bit easier just to spread it out if you do want it to go right to the edges. I'm quite happy with the size of this pizza, so I'm going to work with this. So when we're happy with the base of the bread dough, we can just spread some tomato puree over the base. Okay, again, as much as you actually want. You can add more. It's a bit more difficult to take it away if you add too much, so just actually add that in stages. Try not to get puree, if you are using puree, right to the edges of the pizza base, because it is quite thin, so it does tend to actually go black in the oven, which doesn't look so great, as nobody really likes to have what looks like burnt pizza, although it won't be your pizza's burnt, it's just the bits of the tomato puree. You can also, if you prefer, which I tend to do with a scone-based pizza, is use tins of chopped tomatoes. Just make sure that you actually drain the juice off those first, so that they don't actually make your pizza too soggy. As well as using puree like I've got here, you could actually use passata, or if you actually wanted to, which would show a greater skill level as well, you could actually make your own tomato sauce to use. So once you're happy with the puree, we can then move on to putting the cheese on the top. If you were going to put ham on your pizza, I would actually suggest that you put the ham on underneath the cheese, because again, particularly with the very thin ham, it does tend to curl up and go black very, very easily in the oven. So I would suggest something like ham, if you're using it, actually needs to, or I would suggest that you actually put that underneath your cheese. Now there's lots of different toppings you could put on here. If you are using anything like sausage or chicken or bacon, you do need to make sure that they've been cooked off first. Don't just put them on raw. It's a good idea to actually put them into a frying pan and cook those off first. But if you're using anything like mushrooms or sweet corn or peppers, those can actually just go on as they are once you've chopped them up. Now I'm keeping this quite simple. I'm actually just going to put some sweet corn on this today. But again, as I said, there are lots of different things, lots of different vegetables that you could put on there if you wanted to, which would certainly add to the colour of the pizza and would incorporate into your fibre day and obviously give you lots of fibre and vitamins. Okay, so once your pizza's ready, you need to pop it into the oven for about 15 to 20 minutes until the base is golden brown and it's nice and firm to touch. So after 15 to 20 minutes, if you check your pizza, the base should be nice and firm. It shouldn't still feel doughy, and the cheese can really be as cooked as you want it. You may prefer to leave it in until it's a bit crispier. This is exactly how I like it, and obviously this is my pizza, the same as it'll be your pizza, so you cook it until you're happy with it. But as I said, just make sure that the base is nice and firm, and then you're ready to go and eat your pizza. Enjoy.